The advice I would give my younger self about getting into a STEAM career is to remember that your path doesn't have to go one way. Remember that you're trans. Remember that this thing is broad, baby.
Hi.
So my name is Sir Lex Kennedy. My pronouns are he, they, and sir. I am a producer and creative storyteller. I like to tell stories visually, whether that be on your cell phone, on your television, on linear TV, or at a movie theater on a big screen. I like to bring stories to life with other creative collaborators. I love comedy, I love drama, I love nonfiction, I love nonlinear storytelling, so I'm pretty broad, very much giving broadband, very much giving he's open. Yeah, so I'm really interested in stories that move my heart and make me feel something. So I consider myself to be Black as fuck, queer as fuck, and hella radical. What that entails is a politic that's rooted in Black feminism, that's rooted in compassion and kindness, that's rooted in agape love, that's love in action, and again, that's really queer. So sitting outside of the binary, outside of what folks are probably used to. So I define my queerness as a politic because for me, the personal is political, right? My personal life, how I move and interact in spaces, and how I am in community with other people is a political act. It's not something that's just happening, right? And it's a personal politic rooted in Black feminist theory that challenges the cis, het, normative, imperialist, white supremacist patriarchy that would seek to see me invalidated, see my experience invalidated. And so my queerness as a politic is really rooted in me reclaiming who it is that I am and how I take up spaces and how I am actively fighting against this ableist, transphobic, white supremacist system and culture that I am existing in. When people talk about culture and the culture this, the culture that, I sometimes push back and I'm like, what are you talking about when you're saying culture? Let's name a thing, right? Let's talk about it as this white supremacist, patriarchal, imperialistic, ableist, transphobic system. That's what the culture is, right? It's my queerness as my personal politic is the means by which I am actively not just theorizing about how I move in spaces, but my praxis in spaces. One time for the TSs, okay? One time for the TSs. Shouts out to all my TS siblings. So I myself identify as trans, masculine. Is it something that I highlight? I can't say that I highlight it. For me, my transness is just a part of who I am. Just like me being a swimmer is a part of who I am, but that's the part of the eligibility committee that I am included in, absolutely. So I grew up in the East Coast to a devoutly religious family, a devoutly Christian, devoutly Kojic, so a Church of God in Christ, what I like to think of as a cult, no shade, but that's tea. So that's my upbringing. I like to think of my queer identity being discovered in the Black church because the Black church to me is probably one of the queerest places. That's where I kind of came into my queerness, but it's also a place where I recognize my queerness wasn't really welcome and wasn't honored. I've been in Los Angeles for 13 years, so it feels like home. It's the one city that I've lived in the longest as an adult. My move to LA wasn't very difficult because one, like I said, I'm trans. And so making transitions and being uncomfortable and having to be in uncomfortable situations is something that I have grown the muscle to stretch, but also because I grew up in a lot of different places on the East Coast. So for me, the transition was a breath of fresh air. It was an opportunity also to get connected to more trans community and more community that was gender affirming and had resources. Coming out to Los Angeles for me was an opportunity to connect to a resourced trans community. Music and storytelling has been the space in which I've been able to create community and build community, and that's something that I've been doing over the last 15 years of my life. That's something that I did in Atlanta, when I lived in Atlanta, that's something that really brought me to LA, right? Connecting with best friends, filmmakers, other artists, and being like, yeah, we should take this show on the road and we should go to LA and see if there are more folks like us. Because at the time in Atlanta, the queer, trans, non-binary community was really small, very isolated, again, under-resourced. Yeah, so I came out here to LA to build that and to tap into what was already here, right? And to build a piece of that. I'm recognizing that LA had a large queer and trans community, but not necessarily Black. And if, the girls or the boys they were stealth or just like very much undercover, low key. So coming out here was an opportunity to connect with folks and also to like build upon that. So as a young baby queer in church, being really drawn to the choir, and I grew up in a Kojic church, so we did a lot of like plays and lyrical dancing and stuff like that. And to me, it was very freeing. And the folks who were directing were always folks who I thought were queer, right? But because we're in church, it's like, no, not really. But it's like, no, I know this. I know the minister of music is a gay. Like I know it to be, I see them and me and them. But that's the place and the knowing of my queerness, right? Very early on in church, being a performer and being in community with other artists in that space. And then my queerness around my queerness as a politic and understanding of my queerness and how that interacts with the world is something that I came into in college. I feel like I transitioned into my professional career super early on because I was a child performer. So on top of doing the musicals and liturgical dancing, at church and plays, I was also doing pageants, right, and talent shows. And I was always, on the stage, but curious about like what these folks in Black were doing, who had the mic set, like who's calling the shots, like how does that work and how are folks interacting and how do I get on that side? And then being a thespian and doing theater and then having to, work both sides of the stage when you're in theater, I was just like, oh, this could be like my zhuzh. Like I don't necessarily like have to be on camera all the time. Like I could be the one calling the shots. Like I could be the stage manager. Being a child performer and then, a young adult performer and seeing both sides of this industry from both performer and crew member, I was like, oh, okay, this is what I want to do, right? And it was where I felt the freest, and that's how I knew it was what I wanted to do. It's where I felt the freest and most like myself and grounded. So my role models are definitely my grandmothers. They're my possibility models. They were the folks who encouraged me to, as some folks like to say, like, let your free flag fly. My grandmothers were the folks who encouraged me to be creative, to express myself, to get on stage. I can still remember like doing my first musical and my grandmother bringing flowers for me, like a bouquet of flowers, and just being so like filled with like love and admiration. Because these were women who weren't just my grannies, right? Like in my mind, it's like, oh, you're a granny, but they were also like leaders in the community, right? Like my grandmother led the church soup kitchen, right? My other grandmother led the disability committee at her church, right? And so seeing them in leadership roles and then actively encouraging me to do what it is that I was called to do is why I consider them to be my role models and my possibility models, because I saw them thriving in the things that they love to do, and they encouraged me to do the thing that I love to do. And I'm like, well, if they thrive doing what it is that they love to do, if I do what it is that I love to do, I'll probably thrive in it as well. When I was in college, I competed in the Campus Movie Fest, and I made my first documentary about hip hop, and it won Best International Documentary. And that was like the moment where I was like, it's not just a hobby. Like, the girls are eating. Let me pull up to the table with my plate. It was really like the moment where I was like, I can make a thing that people like to see, that is not just for me, but like for other folks. And I can succeed in this thing. So that was my first year. Yeah, that was my first year in college. And I've been freelancing ever since. And now I'm working in more of a corporate role. But yeah, that's what was like the come to Jesus moment. Like, okay, I stayed up all night making this documentary with a friend from class. We didn't really know what we were doing in terms of like, because when you make a doc, it's kind of It's loose. It's just, we don't know what the subject is gonna give. We're just here to explore. And then to stay up all night and edit it, put it together, and then screen it for an audience, and the audience love it, and it get picked up. I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. I might be doing this. As somebody who came into college, it's like, well, I'm a poli-sci major. You know, I am going to serve my community. I'm gonna run for office. Very much gave next semester, changing my major to film. I'm minoring in women's studies, and we're really gonna set this thing on fire. So the documentary is called Hip Hop, the New Movement That Was. It's like maybe it's like 5-6 minutes about the birth of hip hop and the origins of hip hop and where hip hop was going. So I made it in 2005. So this is when the rap, like Southern rap scene was just like bubbling and like popping, right? So like think Laffy Taffy, D4L, Franchise Boys. So it's not, I mean, you know, we're in 2024. So this is at a time where hip hop still was a baby, not really getting its genre respect. So the goal of us making the documentary was like, no, we got so many talented people here in the AUC who make hip hop. Like, we're gonna put a spotlight on them, give a little history lesson, shine a light on our homies who are artists, and like really let folks know, like, nah, hip hop is, you know, the South got something to say, you know, in the words of Andre 3000. It's just really interesting that you can still pull it up right now on YouTube because Campus Movie Fest owns it and owns the rights to it. And you can check it out and see, you know, some of my fellow classmates who are now like bona fide artists. It's just wild. It's a really cool time capsule doc. So I went to college in Atlanta, Georgia, Spelman College. And my college time was a bit tumultuous. Like, I was a stellar student, super active on campus, coming into my queerness, coming into my masculinity a lot more. And it was a time where my mom was just like, I don't know about this. And so after my first year of college, I came back and my mom kicked me out. And, you know, she just was like, I'm not having this lesbianism. Like, the lesbians gotta go. And I was like, is it because I'm a lesbian? She's like, yeah, you gotta go. And so I ended up dropping out of Spelman in 2007 and just like staying in Atlanta, just like trying to make something shake, as we like to say, and hopped on YouTube. After I did the Campus Movie Fest competition, I decided like I want to get more into video, and this is when YouTube was just starting out. And I just started exploring, like just asking questions and looking up different production videos. And so between YouTube, what I like to call YouTube University, and me working freelance gigs as a production assistant, as a runner, like any opportunity that I can get to be on set working in any capacity, I was there. So like I had both real world on set education and then YouTube University education from filmmakers across the globe sharing their tricks and tips around like Final Cut Pro and how to edit. Like I literally learned how to edit Final Cut Pro on YouTube, how to set up a shot, how to use lighting on YouTube. So in 2011, I moved to LA with a group of queer, trans, non-binary artists, and we decided that LA feels like a bigger pool for us to be able to find work. Let's make it happen. I got into a program maybe 4 months after moving out here to LA with Outfest called the Outset program. That was a program that allowed young people, at the time I was a young person, young people the opportunity to make a short film, and they would fund it and premiere it at the festival. Got into that program. And then from there, I was like, oh, the bug is it. Like at that point, I had fully been bitten by the industry bug. And I said, I am gonna be the director. I'm gonna be the next biggest director, like period, point blank. And I enrolled in Los Angeles City College's film program because it was an inexpensive film program. Some of my favorite directors came through that program. So I said, why not? Why not give it a chance? I had some scholarship money from being an AmeriCorps Vista member. So I said, I'm gonna just take that money, move it over here. And I got a certificate in TV and film from the Los Angeles City College. So long story short, right, I had real world experience as my educator. I had YouTube experience as my educator, and then community college, right? So a very non-traditional, non-linear, again, very trans educational experience, I like to think. So I'm currently the producer of audience engagement at KABC in Los Angeles. I got into this role in a very non-linear way. I believe that a lot of the roles that I've gotten is because of the folks that I know and how I show up in spaces. I want to work with people who I like and who are kind. So I like to show up in spaces and be kind. And I like to think that that's what's gotten me the roles that I've gotten. Before I was with ABC7, I was with KTLA 5. I got that role because a friend of mine recommended me to a really amazing vice president there at KTLA 5. When she moved from KTLA 5 to ABC7, she brought her amazing team with her, or the folks that she could, and I was on that team. And now, yeah, I'm flourishing and I'm thriving in that role. I got to this role by knowing someone. You know, I don't want to be like, oh, you know, it's about who you know, but really, it's not about who you know, right? It's about who can sponsor you, right? Like who is speaking about you in the rooms that you're not in and can speak highly about who you are and the work that you do. So I like to think that all those PA jobs, all of those jobs that I took before coming to this role, like led me to get into this position and space, right? Because I had folks who could sponsor me and be like, you know what, you got something happening over here? Sir Lex Kennedy, he's hardworking, he's gonna show up on time, he's gonna go above and beyond. I love him, he makes me laugh. We have a great time together. That's what's gotten me to where I am. So as somebody who's been a part of different film programs and again, been on different sets and built those relationships, I've been able to really tap into a broad and generous queer, trans, non-binary community that has allowed me to be my full self, right? They are the folks who I consider to be my adult possibility models. My grandmothers are no longer here on earth, but I'm grateful that they're powerful ancestors on the other side, and they have brought wonderful people into my life to be my sponsor. So I use the word sponsor because I feel like a sponsor has to put some skin in the game, right? Like a sponsor has to put something on it. Not just like, oh, this person, Sir Lex is great, but like, I'm willing to put my reputation on the line. I'm willing to say that I've done this with this person and it's been a great experience beyond just, oh yeah, you should just do it for me because you know me. So some of the adult possibility models for me are my peers, right? And that might seem weird, but seeing Texas Isaiah thrive as a photographer, as a storyteller, as a visual storyteller, seeing Black, trans, unapologetically like, this is who I am, this is how I show up in the world. Folks thrive and be on network TV and be filming and the covers of some of my favorite books with some of my favorite people. It reminds me like, oh, okay, it's possible for you. It's not out of reach, it's not invisible. So, you know, like the way I'm talking to you is like how I talk. I used to think like, oh, I had to be two different people, right? Like I had to code switch. And I decided like, I ain't switching for nobody. Like once I came into like my full self, I decided like, yeah, ain't no switch up, right? Like you all are all gonna get the same Sir Lex Kennedy, right? So for me, what that looks like is showing up as folks like to say, authentic self, but like I'm showing up as all of me, right? My Black, queer, trans ass is gonna show up in the room. I'm gonna pop my tea, right? I'm gonna talk using the language that's comfortable for me. I'm gonna use the AAV that's comfortable for me. If I wanna answer questions about, oh wait, what do you mean? Maybe I'll answer it, maybe I won't. Maybe you can use Google, I really don't care. But ultimately, it's me showing up as my radical self, saying like, my Blackness, my queerness, my transness can be present in any and all spaces, and they have to move for me as opposed to me moving for them. I was socialized to make myself smaller, socialized to make myself palpable, right? And I have actively, over the past few years, been reprogramming myself and transitioning to being like, nah, B, everybody gonna get the same Lex. Because it's too much. It's too much to put on and put off. I attribute all of that to me coming into my transness. I'm a Selenium Scorpio, I think that's how they say that. Like most of my chart is in Scorpio. I'm just gonna be me, right? Like it could bump you and we might have tension or, yeah, there might be tension around that. And there has been tension around me being like, yeah, this is my zhuzh. And somebody being like, zhuzh? Zhuzh? It's like, yeah, boo, it's my zhuzh. Like, I'm not about to change what I'm saying because you might not know or you don't. Nope. You're gonna have to get hip to the T or not be hip to the T, but this is how I'm gonna speak. Use context clues. I don't I don't know what to do. And that was like a supervisor, right? Like I don't like to say the word boss, right? Like that was a supervisor, that was upper level management being like, And I knew what the was, right? It's like, it's a little too queer. It's a little too black. You're showing up as a little too much yourself. But I'm like, hey, bro, like you showing up as your full self and all of your privilege, right? And all of your assumptions. So don't think you the only one coming in a space like that. I'm gonna show up as my whole self, and that's been a problem for them, never for me. I think that what this industry lacks are resources for queer and trans people because they're so hell-bent on the binary. Either there's a female director program or a woman of color director program. But what about the trans folks? What about the gender diverse folks? Like, where do we apply? What fellowships and programs are for us? And then some people might say, well, the women's. And it's just like, but when I see the people selected, I'm never seeing trans women. So what is it really giving? I really feel like we need to have more, fellowships, programs, resources that are not colorblind or gender blind, but like be specific and intentional to be like gender diverse and expansive. I find that in this industry, folks like to hire people that they know. And what tends to happen is the people that they know are quite homogenized. And it becomes a homogenized set. And when there's no edits around, you need to have a diverse space and real like intention around diverse spaces, there won't be any. I feel like we had that a lot in 2020 because of the unaliving of Black folks at the hands of the state. But that's teetered off, right? I'm seeing less sets that are diverse and less cast, less films, right? Like if I think about what came out this year and I think about like how many of these films had a queer person as a lead, how many of these films had a woman as a lead, how many had like a Black, like how many Southeast Asian films did we get this year? How many films did we get with two principal characters who were disabled? Exactly, right? So when we don't have like mandates from folks in the industry to make things diverse, we won't have them. And when we don't have traumatic things happening in our faces on the news all the time, there won't be an urgency to do that. And I would like for there to be one outside of that. And I feel like a way to create that is by, again, creating programs that pipeline folks into roles. Like specifically, like not just a program, oh, you do this program and then go about your merry way, but like, no, we're hiring folks from this said program. Unfortunately, places like Netflix are cutting back on those things. So if you stream there, you might want to think about not streaming there.
I remember seeing something about like Pixar also being like, oh, we're no longer doing like specialized stories anymore. It has to be general public, which
They're like, oh, Turning Red didn't do well. So Luca didn't do well. So maybe we should stay, Lightyear didn't do well. So we should stay away from that and just, oh my God, Inside Out 2, it did so amazing. That's what we need more. It's like, nah, bro, that's not what we need. Like, we know Black Panther does well. We have the numbers to prove it. Stop playing in our face. So I think of my transness as a superpower and my queerness as a superpower and as a very colorful, like, spectrum lens. And I find that when you have folks who have different lenses in conversation with each other, you tend to solve problems faster. You tend to get to the end quicker. You tend to be more creative in the making of whatever it is that you make when you include voices that have different color lenses. I believe that when we have folks who paint with different brushes, you create a more vibrant portrait. And I feel like having queer folks across spectrums, specifically in STEAM, allows for us to have more vibrant, more vivacious AI, and not AI that is racist and ableist and homophobic and transphobic, right? You have tech that really speaks to all of us as opposed to like the bros. And also because queer folks make the best things. So why wouldn't you want queer folks on your team? Like, get in the game. You want to have the MVP. And in my brain, it's always like, big brain is always like, yeah, the queers got it, right? Because I don't know about you, the maker in me is always just like, I can make anything. I might not have ever made it before, but the gay in me is like, we can make this. It's like, you've never made this before. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna make it and it's gonna be great. And I find that's because of, my queerness, my transness, having to make myself who I am just gives me a different type of juice. And I know that's not something that's specific to me, but rather something that I've seen in community with my fellow queer and trans folks. And I feel like industries need to have that. It's an intangible soft skill. I believe that true equity and inclusion in STEAM workplaces, and in particularly my workplace, starts in the hiring practices and then becomes elevated so the leadership reflects the communities that we're serving. So if you are the general manager of a station, hopefully you reflect the audience that you're serving. And if your audience that you're serving is predominantly Black and brown folks, predominantly Spanish-speaking folks, then as a GM, you should be a Black or brown person who speaks Spanish. That's what I believe, right? So for me, it starts HR being intentional about bringing in candidates that don't just have bachelor's degrees, right? Like, that aren't just non-felons. Like, you're looking at felons, right? People are like, what? Felons? We literally have somebody who's a felon running for office, so miss me with that. Like, looking at felons, looking at folks who didn't finish community college, looking at folks who are certified, being like, okay, you don't have any formal education, but let me look at your resume and see what sweat equity you've put in and where to receive whatever education that you have. So yeah, from the HR level, being more open. I don't care if you're trans, if you're gender nonconforming, if you're non-binary, and people are like, well, you can't put that on you can't have that on the application. I need for you to be actively looking for us. Well, we can't do that. I know me. When I'm at recruiting opportunities, I'm actively, where are the gays? I show up with my gay pen, okay? I'm extra gay because I want to attract that which I am putting out. I'm creating the garden for my butterflies to come and pollinate. I need HR to do the same. I need management to be doing the same. And I need my upper management C-suite levels to not be homogenized. If they all look the same, y'all all wearing these ugly ass, old ass, crusty gray slacks and light blue shirts, get out of here. Mans, none of you holographic tee? None of you? Stop. If it's just Under Armour polos, I'm out of here. Like, y'all need to be like, yeah, we need to change this up. We need to, if you're all doing the Spider-Man, then maybe take your senses somewhere else and switch it up. Some of my favorite projects that I've worked on are projects that I've worked on with queer and trans folks. Quite honestly, working with my community has been the most fulfilling and enriching part of the work that I do. It's the work that I do for free. I'm most proud of my fuck-ups. I'm most proud of the times where I tried a thing and it wasn't the greatest and it kind of could have been better. But I'm most proud of it because those are the spaces and places where I learn the most about myself. And those are the things that I look back and reflect on and say, look how far you've come. Like the growth in not being afraid to try something for the first time and not be good at it, because who's great at something that they try for the first time, unless they're a prodigy. I mean, okay, and I'm not that. But yeah, I'm most proud of the times where I failed at things because I didn't stop. And I'm still like doing the thing. Like I didn't let that failure or that fuck up be like, oh, that's it. Like, nah, bro, like it's okay. You can get back up again and try it again. That's what I'm most proud of. Some of my goals for my future self is to continue to try things for the first time, fail at things, make dope art with dope folks, continue to center my people in my stories, and to always remain true to my North Star and why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. And for me, that's really rooted and based in being the wildest dreams of my ancestors and allowing myself the freedom to explore all of me, both creatively and also like putting as many people on as possible. I'm not just trying to be like the only one in the room. When I was talking earlier, I was talking about how spaces are homogenized. And sometimes there's like a speck of color, there's like a speck of glitter in the room. And I always wonder, like, why is there just one? If you invite me to a space and I'm the only black ass, queer ass, trans ass person, don't invite me. Okay, it's not safe for me. That's not a safe space. I wanna be amongst my folks across the spectrum. And I wanna bring folks into the spaces that I am across the spectrum. So really just making access to my industry more accessible to my communities is a major goal for my future self. So y'all didn't see this, but in the midst of us filming, I got up and shot a cute little, a little short content for TikTok or Instagram Reels or wherever it's gonna go. But one of my hobbies is just dancing and, again, being silly, honoring my inner child. So one of my hobbies is dancing. And not just like, oh, choreography, like no, very much TikTok choreography, very much, I'm not going to a dance class per se, but I am dancing. And another hobby that really feeds my inner child is playing Uno. Like, I love playing Uno. I've been playing it since I knew how to match the colors and the numbers. So like for a very long time, probably at this point, like over 30 years. Hopping on a stage and making people laugh, like doing a little stand-up, you know, hobby, right? Not a thing that is like, oh, I gotta make money from this. Oh, it's my bread and butter, babe. It's just a thing I like to do for fun. For funsies, it's fun, you know? And I just recently learned how to play Bid Whiz, Whiz as the OGs call it. Look it up if you haven't. Great fun game. So I wanna be like an old elder queer that's like, you don't know how to play spades? Come over here, I'm gonna teach you how to play spades. Oh, you don't know how to play Bid Whiz? Come over here, I'm gonna teach you how to, oh, you playing Uno? Okay, bring the big cards, yeah. My advice for a young person trying to enter the STEAM career is to try everything. Try it all. Because in the trying and the doing is how you learn more about yourself and you get directed more, I believe, more towards your North Star. By trying a thing and saying, especially things that you don't like to do or a thing that you wouldn't see yourself doing, just try it, because you never know. And especially in this field, there are so many roles and so many jobs that we need to be in as queer and trans and non-binary people that you only get to experience from trying it. So try it all, babes. Try it all. Try it multiple times if you really like it, and be your whole self when you're doing the thing. Anybody that's trying to pursue a career in this field, the best tech skill to have, to be able to pivot. And that's across the board, right? Because you can go into, for me, as a producer, I can go into a day of filming thinking, okay, it's gonna go this way, we've got the whole thing mapped out, and then boom, actually the place that you had, you don't have anymore. And if I'm not able to just pivot, I might get stuck, damn, well, I gotta cancel everything. And it's like, no, babes, the show has to go on. You have to be able to pivot, right? Like you go into creating a prototype and you think the prototype is going to do X, Y, and Z. In stage 4, where you're testing, you realize that actually this prototype doesn't fix this problem, but it fixes this other problem. Do you sit and say, well, scrap it, you know, we gotta focus on this other problem? Or do you move forward and say, let's pivot and solve the problem that this prototype is solving, right? Being able to pivot is a skill that I think is necessary in this industry. When I close my eyes and I imagine a place that is safe for queer, trans, non-binary, lesbian, asexual, gender non-conforming, bisexual people. It looks like a place where we can play whatever sport we want to play. We can be on whatever team we want to be on. We have access to our moms. We have access to food that is nourishing. We are taking up spaces in all places. We are mediocre. We are great. We are excellent. We are everything in between. Yeah. And imagine a place where like unicorns are, like real life unicorns. We're like, what the fuck? No, like dead ass. Like furries can be furries. Like really just like, honey, we just honor everybody's zhuzh fully. Nobody's yucking anybody's yum. It's like, that show's yum? Okay, babe, we're here for it. We're using our superpowers just to just be, yeah.